Guild Wars, Sea of Sorrows. Chapter 37. No. You don't know a storm till you ride the wind, beneath cold and blackened skies, till you're sailing through a thunderhead, with the lightning in your eyes. Death, he laughs in the sails and the jags, and the bloody sun won't rise. Weather the storm. A.S. Kobaya's battle plan spread among the two fleets. The Critons and the Patchwork Armada began to work together. Although neither had the ability to defeat a dead ship alone, working as one, they began to turn their advantage into victory. Sycox and Fasher led the charge aboard the Pride, plowing courageously into their enemy as though wholly unafraid. Their bravery was contagious. Where the Critons had been flagging, they picked up the fight once more, inspired by the Pride and her cobbled-together city fleet. Acting as one, they drove the Aryan vessels back toward the south. Only the two Gizebecs held their ground, sweeping the sea with fire and lightning, using their powerful magic to eradicate any living ships that happened to cross their path. What would I say? Kobaya looked out across the sea at the Nomad 2, still foundered near a set of moss-covered rocks that jutted up from beneath the sea. He could make out sailors moving on her deck, trying to fix the yardarms of the one remaining mast, firing volleys at dead ships that came too close in their pursuit of more active Creadan vessels. He couldn't find the dark-haired captain amid the others, but he knew she was there. What would she say if she knew he was taking the prince's ship and her son into battle? The Balthazar's trident could be destroyed if they were outmatched by the ships of ore. Young Dane could die. He's dead if I don't. What's that, Commodore? Livia's voice was smooth and emotionless. Although the words were a question, there was no hint of curiosity in her voice, and Kobaya wondered if she was already aware of his thoughts before he spoke them. He raised his head to look at her. I need you to issue a command to the Seraph. Get the nobles and other civilians to the center of the ship, where they'll be most protected from shrapnel and other damage to her hull. Keep those people together. If the ship starts to sink, get them to the lifeboats and get them out of here. I don't like going to battle with them on board, but I can't afford the time to get them off, and they wouldn't last long in rowboats. Not with the maw chewing up everything that fits in its mouth. Livia nodded. Of course. Quick to defend her more fragile companions, the Pride engaged one of the ships with scarlet sails. The spellcasters of Lion's Arch were less powerful, their magic less facile, but they'd fought such ships before, and their vessel was the faster. Bit by bit, the Pride led their opponent away from the main battle, leaving the body of the Armada to dismantle the rest of the dead ships without interference from the devastating Orion spells. The Balthazar's trident closed on the second, with Kobaya yelling encouragement and tactics to the three young elementalists aboard. 4 guardians, like Osh Moran, stood on the Balthazar's trident's bow, firing orb after orb of energy at the 2 Exebecs. A single mesmer, the Balthazar's trident's messenger, and one of the Shining Blade, used his illusions to hide their true position, causing the Exebec to waste attacks against empty sea. Still, the red-sailed Exebec was smaller than the prince's galleon and far faster in the water, using widespread area effect spells to catch the Balthazar's trident and deal damage to her hull and masts. Sickly fireballs exploded from the Exebec's cannons, setting the Creadan galleon's canvas alight, and one of the Creadan elementalists was forced to turn her attention from the battle to use water spells to put out the blaze. The impact had another cost as well. The young mesmer used to coordinate among the Creadan ships had been knocked overboard, swallowed up by the maw. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the rear of the Creadan galleon. Amid the shouting and furious activity, one of the Seraph Marines yelled a report to the commanders. They're using a wind spell to block our cannons. It surrounded the lower decks of the ship. If we continue firing, we'll only be damaging ourselves. Order the cannons to hold their fire, Adair called back to them commandingly. Continue using the deck guns. Load the carronades with grape shot and fire at their sails." He glanced at Kobaya, and the Commodore nodded approvingly. Adair pointed at one of the elementalists. "Darlin, get below and see if you can counter that wind spell, or divert it to our sails. See if we can use their magic for our benefit." The woman nodded and raced for a nearby hatch to the decks below. "Clever," Kobaya chuckled to himself. The boy might just make a good commander someday. Seeing that the Balthazar's trident was in danger, the Pride cut short her attack on one opponent, turning her cannons toward the Exebec attacking the prince's ship. So long as the Exebec was fighting the Pride, she couldn't also assault the Balthazar's trident. But that made 2 Orion ships against 1 small pinnace, and the Pride wouldn't be able to hold them off for long. Meanwhile, the maw zigzagged between the ships, churning the waves and snapping its massive teeth with a sound like clanging iron. The Pride's guns harried the Exebec, and the Balthazar's trident followed suit as best it could. But the Orion elementalists continued to hold their ground against both sets of opponents. "Sick ox!" Kobaya yelled at the top of his lungs as the pinnace pulled closer, like with the Salma's grace. He pointed at the closest Agak and grinned. On the other ship, the rust-furred engineer's 4 ears stretched forward, trying to catch Kobaya's words. Comprehension dawned on Sick Ox's face, and he lifted one hand in agreement, turning to yell something to the crew, his words too muffled for Kobaya to make out. Slowly but unrelentingly, the Pride pulled alongside one of the Exebecs. With the Balthazar's trident on one side and the Pride on her other, the Exebec was caught in a simultaneous volley of cannon fire, and the Exebec's magic allowed her to defend against only one. Hull collapsing, her magic overwhelmed by the spells of the Creadan elementalists, the Orion ship foundered and broke apart. Kobaya began to warn Livia. "They'll come at us under the water." "No, they won't." The ancient necromancer raised her hands, her fingers arched like claws and her eyes turning black from edge to edge. The language she spoke echoed with murder, and withering green smoke hissed from her palms and her eyes. As the Orion zombies and whites touched the Balthazar's trident, Livia's magic took hold of them, shredding their putrid flesh into a thick, reddish goo. Kobaya stared at the necromancer in awe and horror, and took a quiet step away. The second Exebec came around, shooting bolts of magical fire at the Balthazar's trident. One caught her side, setting the hull alight and causing the crew to respond with an immediate brigade of buckets and water spells. Before the scarlet-sailed vessel could fire again, the Pride dodged between them, firing a broadside to get the Exebec's attention away from the slower, wallowing galleon. Just then, there was a crashing thump, and the Balthazar's trident bucked in the water. Kobaya grasped the gunwale and looked over the side of the ship. The water below them was white-capped and churning, but through the waves he caught a glimpse of the maw rising beneath them. There was a second jolt, and the ship's keel creaked dangerously. "It's trying to break the ship apart," he yelled to Adair. Amid the shouts and panic of their crew, Kobaya noted a third ship approaching. For a moment he thought it was one of the Lion's arch fleet. But something about the vessel bothered him. Taking a second look, he realized the ship was Yam's, the brigantine the merchant had purchased to qualify for a spot on the captain's council. "I can't believe it," Kobaya exclaimed. "That cowardly old coot used the Asura gates to get to his ship in Radissum, and then sailed all the way back alone? Has he gone completely mad?" The Azuran brig was no war vessel. Kobaya doubted she had enough guns to spearfish along the coast. Despite her blue, glowing, enchanted masts and her alchemically reinforced hull, the sturdy little caravel was a cargo ship, with an expanded hold and a study hall. Yam could have at least brought a few more ships, or a bunch of Asuran elementalists, groused the Commodore, trying to catch a glimpse of the Asura on the Nadir Shill's deck. I can't imagine what a little dinghy like that is going to do against dead ships or the maw. He saw only one robed figure on the deck. The rest were obviously frightened sailors, scurrying about the ship as they prepared to enter the battle zone. "My Lord Prince," one of the sailors approached them. "Bad news." The explosion below reached our ammunition stores. Elementalist Darlin was forced to flood the area with water spells to be sure it didn't catch fire and destroy the ship. We saved most of the munitions, but Darlin... Well, sir, she gave her life for the trident. Bad news, indeed. Adair frowned. "And the gunpowder?" The sailor shook his head. "Not in good order, sir. Between the wind-stoppering our cannons, the explosion in our stern, and the flooding of the deck, it's all we can do to load the carronades." "Damn it." The prince stared sullenly toward the second exebec. "We've got one more of those gods' cursed vessels left, not to mention the monster below. By Balthazar's hounds, what are we going to do?" "Looks like you're in trouble again, Booka." The whisper came out of thin air, nearly making Kobaya jump out of his skin. It was high-pitched, snarky, and wholly familiar. "I have no idea how you managed to get along without me.